Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 15 tight end rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're covering all things related to the tight end position, beginning with defensive matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. After that, of course, we're going to be talking about my top 16 tight end rankings. For those of you who are trying to stay up to date on my rankings, because again, there is a game tonight, Thursday Night Football, between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll mention both Darren Waller and Hunter Henry. But outside of that, there is going to be 2 Saturday games, a Sunday game. So if you're trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, make sure you show up to the live streams that I have on Sunday morning, and specifically this week, and for the rest of the season, on Saturday mornings, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kickoff with Kirchhoff. We'll be talking about updated rankings, players, starts, sits, all the information that you need to know prior to kickoff, and make sure you guys are ready for Week 15 to potentially get yourself to the Fantasy Football Championships next week. So again, make sure you guys show up to that. I also want to thank you guys. We recently hit 36,000 subscribers here on the channel. That was the goal. We had set that goal a couple months ago to try to get to this position. I cannot thank you guys enough. It really has been an incredible journey this season. Hopefully we can get to the finish line and capture some championships. But I really do appreciate for those of you who have subscribed to the channel, have continued to support my efforts as the weeks and months and years have gone on here. Fantasy football, YouTube, stuff like that. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. Make sure you leave a like down below, comment down below, and share with friends and family. If, again, you aren't worried about them potentially beating you this season. But either way, I appreciate it. Okay, so before we get into talking about tight ends, there's a couple pieces of information that I want to cover, and I know many of you are probably wondering. What it currently looks like is this game between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders. It's probably going to be a game where a lot of starters are going to be missing. I think there's 4 defensive starters on the Raiders that are going to be out today. Also, they fired their defensive coordinators. That doesn't look great for them defensively. But on the other side of the ball, there's not going to be many players taking advantage of it because, again, Mike Williams and potentially Keenan Allen are both going to miss this week. This does increase the value of a Hunter Henry, Austin Eckler tonight. But either way, we got to keep our eye on that. I am not up to date on exactly whether or not they're going to play. They're probably going to test it out before the game. And if, in fact, they go, then so be it. But we'll kind of keep our eye on that. But make sure you are aware that there's a potential that they could miss, and you might have to pull them out of your lineup potentially tonight. All right, outside of that, we should be good to go. Let's talk about matchups at the tight end position for Week 15 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, the matchups are pretty simple. The Jets are continuing to give the most points to opposing tight ends. Even though Mark Andrews didn't have an amazing game on Monday night against the Cleveland Browns, they certainly do give up a lot of touchdowns and a lot of yardage to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. But ultimately, it seems to be a consistent pace of the teams that are at the top of this list have been here since the first couple weeks of the season and continue to stay among the top. When you're giving up a lot of points to tight ends and you do not have the right safeties or the right defense in general to cover some of these tight ends in the National Football League, anybody who plays against the Travis Kelce the week later is jumping up 5 or 6 spots on this list. But regardless, as it currently stands, I think these are great matchups. I think playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, Eric Ebron, who's coming off of a rough week, should be able to take advantage of it. We have Irv Smith, because of, again, Kyle Rudolph will be potentially missing this week. He did not practice yesterday or today. Irv Smith could play against the Chicago Bears and have himself a pretty good week. We have other teams like Gronkowski going against the Atlanta Falcons, Jordan Reed playing against the Buffalo Bills, Jared Cook playing against the Kansas City Chiefs. There are so many good matchups. Mark Andrews playing against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It doesn't stop. Robert Tonyan playing against the Carolina Panthers. There are so many good tight ends that are already among the top that are in advantageous matchups this week. We couldn't ask for anything more. Outside of that, we can cover some of the tougher matchups at the position. But again, the tight end position is thin enough in terms of its depth that, again, the starter that you currently have and are running with on a weekly basis is the guy that you're probably going to go with this week regardless. Now, if there's a decision to make, potentially the matchup could play a factor in it. But as of right now, the 49ers are not giving up a lot of points. That definitely hurts Dalton Schultz. But then again, he hasn't really helped himself out as of late, not scoring any touchdowns. And potentially in a full PPR is the only way that you're potentially playing him. Half PPR is getting like 4 or 6 points a week, which isn't great. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's nothing that I want to play against them. The New England Patriots, again, they are one of the better defenses in the National Football League. But the question remains, is Mike Gesicki going to play this week? He, was limited today, but as it currently stands, the expectation is that he's probably not going to play. Do we want to even play a tight end versus Bill Belichick? That has been something that has hurt us in the past. But regardless, now that we've covered and given you guys some perspective as to how many points these defenses are giving up to opposing tight ends thus far this season on average in a half PPR scoring format. We can move on to our top 16 tight end rankings on the week, beginning with our number 1 tight end. It is Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had another 20-plus point fantasy week in a half PPR, 23.6 points, 8 catches, 136, and a touchdown. That's 7 of the last 9 games in which he has had 19-plus fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format. It is 6 consecutive games in which he's had 8-plus catches. He leads all receiving options in the National Football League, wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, in total receiving yards. He is unbelievable. He is ahead of DK Metcalf in receiving yards this season, who is the number 1 receiver in receiving yards. So it's unbelievable what kind of a season Travis Kelce is having this year. At this pace, the way that he's going to be a first-round pick next year without a doubt. In comparison to the depth of the tight end position, but regardless, we'll talk about that after the season concludes. He plays against the New Orleans Saints this week. I don't care who he plays against, to be honest. Travis Kelce dominates against everyone. Even in games in which he doesn't score a touchdown, he's still getting himself 8 catches, 80 yards, and getting a lot of work. As long as Mahomes is under center and this team is trying to win, and this could potentially be a shootout between these two high-powered offenses, I think Travis Kelce, of course, continues to be our number 1 tight end for this week. Our number 2 is Mark Andrews, which may be a little bit of a surprise considering Darren Waller has kind of been in this number 2 slot for the last couple of weeks. But the reason I wanted to mention Mark Andrews is mainly because, again, the wide receivers of the Ravens, there were multiple receivers that popped and have been put on the COVID IR list. So as it currently stands, there isn't really many receiving options. Maybe Willie Snead, maybe Des Bryant if he's cleared to go. But those aren't receiving options that I see as a threat. And specifically, just looking at what Lamar Jackson has done in the passing game in terms of passing yards, I mean, he played a huge game on Monday night, and the max yardage he got through the air was 163. I mean, in the couple weeks past, again, he has struggled to get over 200. He hasn't really been a passing quarterback this season in comparison to last year. That's been his biggest regression. But either way, we saw Mark Andrews had 5 catches, 78 yards, 10.3 fantasy points. Plays against Jacksonville, who give up the 8th most points to opposing tight ends, who have given up 10 touchdowns to opposing tight ends this season. That's the second most amongst all teams in the National Football League, only behind the New York Jets, who of course give up the most points. In the last couple of weeks, Jeff Swaim went for 3 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown this past week for the Tennessee Titans. Austin Hooper scored a touchdown against them. Eric Ebron scored a touchdown against them. That's the last 3 games that they've played. So again, the Jacksonville Jaguars have definitely been struggling, and I definitely think Mark Andrews should be able to take advantage of it because of the lack of depth of receiving targets on this team and the fact that, again, he is Lamar Jackson's favorite target in that offense. We moved to Darren Waller as our number 3. Again, he wasn't too far behind, but I think Darren Waller, again, he himself has himself a potential good week on his hands here because Henry Ruggs is probably going to miss tonight with the COVID IR situation. I mean, there's a lot of players going out, but either way, Darren Waller is a stud tight end coming off of a performance in which he had 7 catches, 75 yards this past week against the Indianapolis Colts. Again, another defense that has been very good against opposing tight ends, but it does not matter when you are a matchup-proof tight end like Darren Waller. He had himself a great performance. And to be honest, playing against the Los Angeles Chargers, the last time he played against them, he had 10 targets, only leading to 5 receptions, 22 yards, and a touchdown. But again, got over that 10-point fantasy mark, which we love to see. Obviously, he's an automatic start, but to kind of give you some more perspective, as of the last couple weeks when they played against the Bills, 2 weeks back, Dawson Knox scored against them, and 3 weeks back against the New York Jets, Chris Herndon scored against them. Unfortunately, we didn't get any utilization out of Hayden Hurst this past week, but again, tight ends have found success against the Los Angeles Chargers secondary just recently and could potentially continue with that with Darren Waller's play tonight on Thursday Night Football. We move on to our number 4, TJ Hockenson. Now, this is going to be fully contingent on whether or not Matthew Stafford plays. As it currently stands, I expect Matthew Stafford to play. If that's the case, of course, TJ Hockenson has been unbelievable. In the last 3 weeks, his target counts are continuing to rise. 8 to 9 to 11. That's 28 targets in the last 3 contests. He's coming off of a performance of 6 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown, playing against the Tennessee Titans this week. Again, the fact that he is getting as many targets as he has gotten in the last 3 weeks, it's obviously going to lead to his success. I always mention it. Opportunity leads to success in fantasy football. And in those last 3 weeks, he's had at least a minimum of 11 fantasy points in each of those 3 contests. So again, I see it as absolute success as long as we have Matthew Stafford, as the starting quarterback of that team this week against the Tennessee Titans. I think it's a perfect play. Now, the Tennessee Titans recently playing against the Indianapolis Colts. Trey Burton, 3 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Mark Andrews, 5 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown. So we've seen tight ends find some success recently against the Tennessee Titans. I always mention they are a team that loves to give up points to tight ends. But regardless, Hockenson is currently the number 3 overall tight end in fantasy and is a stud and continues to be a monster play every week. Our number 5 for this week is Robert Tonyan, tight end of the Green Bay Packers. Again, Robert Tonyan has been unbelievable. Now, the thing I also wanted to mention, if in fact TJ Hockenson is going to not have Matthew Stafford starting and in the lineup, then we'll move Tonyan to the number 4 spot accordingly. But Robert Tonyan in the last 4 weeks has scored touchdowns in every single contest. He's coming off of a week in which he had 5 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown. He has had at least 4 minimum catches in the last 4 games. 4 catches, 40 yards and a touchdown. That is what he has done every single week, putting up nearly, 12 to 13 fantasy points a week. Again, he plays against the Carolina Panthers. Noah Fant should have taken advantage of the matchup last week against Carolina, but he got injured, left the game. Nick Vannett came in his stead, had 4 catches, 20 yards, and a touchdown. Kyle Rudolph the week before, 7 catches for 68. TJ Hockenson recently, 4 catches for 68. We had the Buccaneers duo of Cameron Brate and Rob Gronkowski combined for 5 catches, 82 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So again, the Carolina Panthers just recently have been giving up a ton of points. This will be in Green Bay. Robert Tonyan continuing to be the red zone threat for this offense after Devontae Adams. It's great to see. He is just a stud tight end this season. Number 4 overall in a half PPR, to be honest. We have Hunter Henry as our number 6. And now I mentioned him a little bit earlier in relation to what exactly is going to happen with this Los Angeles Chargers offense. Is Mike Williams going to play? Is Keenan Allen going to be active? That is the biggest question mark of this evening. But regardless, I think Hunter Henry is going to have to step up, because if both of them miss, if one of them miss, there's probably going to be an opportunity for him to come into this game and be a main pivotal receiving option based on the matchup. And again, the fact that he is a guy that is going down the field. Just this past week had 8 targets, 6 catches for 41 receiving yards. Sure, that number could definitely increase, even though he had a 7-point week. You attach a touchdown to it, maybe a couple extra receptions based on a couple extra targets, because we know Keenan Allen is a guy that has gotten almost 50 targets in the last 4 games. Some number like that. It's absolutely crazy. But if you continue to send numbers like that in the opposite directions, in the direction of potentially Tyron Johnson or Hunter Henry, Austin Eckler, there could be success for these players that we don't really expect to see on a weekly basis, but due to the circumstance, it may end up being to their benefit. But as of right now, I think the Las Vegas matchup is great. The defense has been struggling. We'll be missing a lot of pieces, and I think Hunter Henry could have himself a pretty sneaky good week this week. We have Jared Cook as our number 7 overall tight end. Again, Jared Cook in the last 2 weeks has been fantastic. He has scored a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. Put up a pretty good performance against the Atlanta Falcons just a couple weeks back, in which he had 3 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. Just this past week, had himself 3 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles. Gets to take on one of the easiest matchups at the tight end position, the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, I've been mentioning him. They have been getting torched by tight end Mike Gesicki this past week before leaving with an injury. 5 catches, 65 yards, 2 touchdowns. Noah Fant the week prior, 4 catches for 57. Gronk, 6 catches for 106. Waller, 7 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. This team cannot stop opposing tight ends. That has been their biggest weakness. And as we've seen, the momentum of Jared Cook continue to grow as of the last 2 weeks. I think Taysom Hill will definitely be looking in his direction in the shootout of a matchup. He's a fantastic player as our number 7 for this week. Number 8 is Rob Gronkowski, another player that, again, got saved by a touchdown last week. And even though when I say saved, 6.7 points isn't something that we're looking for, but 1 catch for 2 yards and 1 touchdown, I'll take it. It bails you out from potentially getting no points in that specific matchup. But either way, I love to see it. He plays against the Atlanta Falcons. They're giving up a lot of points this season to opposing tight ends. But the fact of the matter is, just recently, there hasn't been too many explosive performances. Sure, we talked about Jared Cook just, a segment before about, him getting 3 catches, 28 and a touchdown. Hunter Henry this last week, 6 catches for 41 against the Atlanta Falcons. But to be honest, Rob Gronkowski is going to have to heavily depend on the fact that he is a red zone threat in this offense. We haven't seen much utilization out of Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin in the last couple of weeks, and even Antonio Brown. There probably won't be a Ronald Jones in the lineup this week. Gronk's going to potentially have to step up, and I think, of course, he's always got high upside and the ability to score, and with that, continues to be a top 8 tight end option for this week. Eric Ebron's our number 9. Like I mentioned before, he plays the Cincinnati Bengals. And even though the earlier matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals this season for Eric Ebron wasn't a great one, again, I honestly think that Cincinnati Bengals, you just go look at how many points they've given up to opposing tight ends and the amount of touchdowns and yardage and receptions they've given up. It just seems to me like Eric Ebron continues to be an automatic start, even though he's coming off of a poor performance, 2 catches for 30 yards against the Buffalo Bills, which again was an advantageous matchup. I'm just looking at some of the performances. Mike Gesicki, 9 catches, 88 yards and a touchdown against the Cincinnati Bengals. Evan Engram recently, 6 catches for 129. There have been some huge games from tight ends recently. Maybe with Deontay Johnson's absence and or not having a running game with James Conner this week, it could be an all-out throwing game from Ben Roethlisberger. And of course, Eric Ebron could benefit from that this week as our number 9. We move on to our number 10 with Logan Thomas taking the spot. Now, Logan Thomas just recently, as of the last 3 weeks, has found so much consistency in terms of fantasy productivity. In the last 3 games, I mean, just talking about the game against Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, 4 catches, 20 yards, and a touchdown. The week after against the Pittsburgh Steelers, led all receivers in that offense and led them to the victory to stop the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers with 9 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown. This past week, 7 targets, 6 catches, 43 receiving yards. Of course, the quarterback switch from Alex Smith to Dwayne Haskins does potentially hurt him. But earlier this season, we saw some great games and a good amount of target share from Dwayne Haskins towards Logan Thomas, through the first 4 weeks of the season prior to the replacement. But either way, I think that the matchup against the Seattle Seahawks, even though it could be seen as a sketchy one, as the Seattle Seahawks secondary has been playing a lot better recently, I still think that Logan Thomas is a huge part of this offense and is going to take advantage and put up a good performance this week. We have Dallas Goedert as our number 11. So here's the thing about Dallas Goedert. Playing against the Arizona Cardinals, I think, Arizona, they're a coin toss, to be honest. It's a matter of whether or not Dallas Goedert is going to get himself into the end zone. And I think there's a very good chance of him doing so because Arizona's defense isn't that great, even though they really did stop Daniel Jones from doing anything. A hurt Daniel Jones with an offensive line that didn't want to block, obviously is going to lead to the success of the Arizona Cardinals. But the question is, can Jalen Hurts get the ball in the direction of Dallas Goedert? As it currently stands, Dallas Goedert is the number 1 tight end in this team. There is no Zach Ertz taking away targets or receptions that are going to play a significant role in diminishing the overall value of Dallas Goedert. So as it currently stands, from my perspective, I feel like Dallas Goedert is a player that could easily be the number 11 tight end at a base minimum floor and have the potential upside of getting himself a touchdown and getting into that top 5 conversation on a weekly basis. That's just how much utilization that the tight ends get from the Philadelphia Eagles, along with his potential skill. And of course, Jalen Hurts looking in his direction. Again, he had 6 targets, 4 catches, 43 yards this last week. You accompany that with a touchdown, I think he can have a pretty good week here. Tyler Higbee is my number 12. Against the New York Jets, again, they're giving up the most points to opposing tight ends this season. In fact, they've given up 12 receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends. That's most amongst all teams in the National Football League. They're almost giving up 1 per game. So it's either Tyler Higbee or Gerald Everett that are going to score. Maybe both of them. You never know. But either way, just talking about some of the recent performances against the New York Jets. Disley, just this last week, 2 catches, 23 yards and a touchdown. We had Darren Waller go for 13, 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mike Gesicki, 2 catches, 35 and a touchdown. Hunter Henry, 4 catches, 48 and a touchdown. They've given up a touchdown to opposing tight ends in 5 consecutive weeks. So again, the New York Jets matchup, a beautiful one to take advantage of. Tyler Higbee's our number 12 because again, I don't know which one of the two are going to score, but I think it could be possible that both do and both have success this week. We have Irv Smith Jr. as our number 13. So Kyle Rudolph has missed Wednesday's practice and Thursday's practice, will most likely miss his 2nd week in a row. That being said, this is a fantastic matchup, especially considering the fact that Irv Smith is coming off of a great performance of 4 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown, 14.3 fantasy points for the Minnesota Vikings. So playing against the Chicago Bears, even though the last time that these two teams met, there wasn't any Irv Smith involved, I think there's a very good chance in which he could show up and have himself a great performance. Just recently, the Packers duo of both Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis put up 7 catches, 83 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Chicago Bears defense. And of course, TJ Hockenson, 7 for 84 recently. So I think, again, there's a very good opportunity for tight ends to take advantage of the Chicago Bears matchup. If I'm not mistaken, they're giving up the 4th most points to opposing tight ends this season. Irv Smith, another great option as a waiver wire streaming pickup and play. We have Evan Engram as our number 14. Again, my only issue, my only quarrel with Evan Engram as it currently stands is Daniel Jones. Is he healthy? Is he not? Is he going to get enough targets in the direction of Evan Engram? Can we rely upon that? And if so, is the Cleveland matchup good enough to where I'm willing to risk it? Because again, Cleveland, they're giving up the 2nd most points to opposing tight ends this season. Just as of late, Pruitt had himself 1 catch, 22 yards and a touchdown. Eifert, 3 catches, 16 yards and a touchdown. Goddard, 5 catches, 77 and a touchdown. In the same game, we also saw Richard Rodgers, 2 catches, 48 and a touchdown. We also say, Mark Andrews just this past week, Monday Night Football, 5 catches, 78. Tight ends produce against the Cleveland Browns. It is just something that they do. They cannot cover. Their secondary has always been hurting all season long, and it's going to continue to ride out. It's just a matter of whether or not we're going to see Evan Engram get enough targets. That's why I have him at 14. I still have hope that he can get it done. We just have to see Daniel Jones be healthy and fully practicing by the end of the week. Jordan Reed is a number 15. Now, I know many of you may have expected me to put George Kittle on today's list because, again, we talked about him being designated to return off the injured reserve, but that doesn't mean that he's going to automatically play in the first week he comes back. I think he'll be playing next week. I think let's just be safe with it. Let's roll out Jordan Reed because, again, they do play against the Dallas Cowboys, who just cannot stop anybody defensively. I know Jordan Reed has not had great performances recently, but that's just the inconsistency at the tight end position. You just got to hope for a touchdown. With Deebo Samuel going down, the absence of a Raheem Mostert, it is going to leave Brandon Ayuk, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Jordan Reed, in my opinion, as the three main leading options to score this upcoming week in this offense. I'll take those odds as of this week. We move on to the final option at the tight end position for this week. It is Cole Kmet. So the tight end out of Notre Dame, the first round pick for the Chicago Bears, even though earlier this season he didn't have as much utilization in this offense because, again, Jimmy Graham was signed as a free agent for a 1-year deal. I think as of late, because of Mitchell Trubisky's influences on this offense, throwing the ball as much as they've had and finding as much success as they've had, Cole Kmet continues to be an option that you want to go ahead and potentially start this week. We mentioned him as a waiver wire option. The past 2 weeks, he has had 7 targets. This past week had 4 catches for 41. The week prior against Detroit, he had himself 5 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. So again, it could end up going in his direction. I know Jimmy Graham stole a touchdown this past week. Either way, Cole Kmet, not a bad option if you are really in a bind, in a struggle. I think there's also guys like Mike Gesicki that I didn't mention because I don't expect him to play. He could easily be a top 8 tight end this week if he's ready to go, and there isn't many available options in that offense. If Jakeem Grant's out, we don't see Myles Gaskin returning this week. We don't see Devontae Parker. Mike Gesicki could be a great option, but again, the defense will be keying in on that because that won't be the only viable option in that offense. You just double cover him, force Tua to make plays. Either way, outside of that, not a lot of other tight ends that we want to talk about. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Later this afternoon, we'll be talking about quarterbacks for Week 15. Thank you. Appreciate the support. Make sure you click the like button down below. And until Saturday, which will probably be the next time because Friday I'm going to take a break. I'll see you guys 8 a.m., 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Kickoff with Kirikoff. Appreciate it. See you. Peace.